Welcome to the Healing Heart podcast, where all healing is always a matter of the heart. I'm your host, Donna Campbell, also known as the Mind Whisperer, interviewing guest experts on all matters of healing. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Healing Heart podcast. And I am super excited for my guest today. Her name is Kitty Foss, and she is a storytelling astrologer. And I've had so much fun getting to know her over the last several weeks. I did have her do my own personal astrology reading, and wow, totally blown off the charts. Because what she does is she interprets the stars and translates the energy into information that can be used in all areas of your life. And so her guides speak to her during the readings, and that just allows her to focus the information for better understanding of personal energy. Using numerology, psychic information, tarot or oracle cards, sacred geometry, and other tools, she connects to you and your energies. And she shares the information in a story form, bringing more meaning to the reading. She's been working with astrology within her own life since 1984 and has taught for over the last 30 years, even more than 30 years, and continues that role as part of the time of the Great Awakening. And then, of course, after retiring, she decided to focus on her own gifts and now uses those for the intuition and founded the Intuition of the Soul, where they help others awaken to all of their spiritual paths. And so there's a lot of courses and different things on how to use your astrology chart to manifest using your personal energy. So welcome here, Kitty, to the Healing Heart podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I really have enjoyed getting to know you, and what an amazing journey this is, all of us together as we network and find each other.
Yes, absolutely. So here on the Healing Heart podcast, it's always about healing the heart, of course, because all healing is a matter of the heart. And yet when we look at it through the eyes of astrology, first share with us how you got interested and involved with astrology for you.
Well, I was in my mid to late 20s, and I knew I had grown up, raised in the Catholic Church, went to Catholic school until junior in high school, very much into the spiritual aspect. But the older I got, the less I understood the restrictions and the rules and all of those things that were part of my Catholicism. And one of the things they teach is it's not a pick and choose religion. Well, that was already an issue for me because I know that spirit speaks directly to my heart. And if something is wrong or does not resonate with who I am, I'm not going to change it because one of the things I always was aware of was my desire to be a good person, as in a helpful, healing person. Not as in a good girl, but it took me a long time to be able to separate those archetypes. And so I was drawn to astrology because of the archetypes, because there was a structure to it, because it made sense to me that we had a map somewhere, that it wasn't as open-ended, and that there was a structure, and that human beings, having been a teacher many years, need a level of structure to understand. It's a paradigm. And so that's what originally drew me. I had tarot cards that still have those same tarot cards that were related to astrology. I got another set that was also related to astrology. And so I began to use it daily, and came to understand it was well past just my sun sign. And then as I used it privately over many of those years, it helped me sort out my thinking. But it was a real private tool. It's a running joke with my friends that I was a closet astrologer. And that when I talk about, once in a while, I'd mention it. And so even for people who've been friends with me a long time, they're like, where did you learn all this? I'm like, years and years and years of reading, but also the word prescience. There are things I know in other lifetimes I was an astrologer because I know them. I've always known them. And I'm able now, with the help of spirit, to be able to kind of channel more information when I do readings where they'll say, go to this, oh, that relates to, and so that's how I got into it, really. But it really wasn't until the passing of my stepmother and my father in the same year, in my, is a Saturn return, 2 or 3 times in your lifetime, it's a big restructuring, that I really started to embrace. I need to live this life, not live in sections. And I know that that's a lot of work that you do, is how do I live from my heart versus how I separate myself and what the emotions that make me live very compartmentalized. And so I decided to fully step into who I was. And that's been an amazing journey.
Yes. Now, I know that astrology is one of what I call one of the 7 sacred arts and sciences out there. So for those that are out there listening who may not have a good understanding of what astrology is, can you give us an idea of what it means to look at the stars or to see the energies around, to how it defines who you are in your life?
So the belief in astrology, especially my belief, is before you came back, many of us have a human journey that is working out different energies. And this is a particularly exciting time to be around, because we know that there's an evolution of mankind happening at this moment. When you are born, there's a picture kind of taken of your toolbox of energy. And that is your astrological natal chart. And by the way, every single year, there's another picture taken that has some influence on the year. And depending on the planet, the point, the asteroid, there are meanings assigned to each of those. And so in this is a map, but it's a map of your story. It's not a predestination of this is going to happen in your life. And I think that that's something that people don't understand. This is a picture of your toolbox, how you can express your energies that you can use, and lessons you signed up for. Like your North Node is your soul's highest goals. So those are kind of the lessons you signed up for. So a planet or a point tells us what we're looking at. The sign it's in is how that expresses itself. Is it very physical? Is it more energetic? Is it more about the way I think? Is it more about the way I feel? Depending what element it's related to. And the house on this wheel that you take a look at, the piece of pie, is kind of where that story, where that act takes place in your chart. So that's why I call myself the storytelling astrologer, because there is a whole story behind these energies. And it's not prescriptive. It's more about how I use, which hammer do I use? Which screwdriver do I take out of my toolbox? And depend more on, and why I'm drawn sometimes a little bit more in a certain way of doing things. And so that is kind of the overall science of it, is to be read is, this is the picture, this is the conversation, these are the characters in my play that I call upon the stage at any one time. They're my backup players, they're my protagonists, antagonists, supporting roles to take a look at in this map that we have. So that's why it's such an interesting story, because even if I have the same placement that you have, depending where it is in the chart and the other relationships, it may play out completely differently. And of course, all energies are in expressions that are more expanded or denser. And we need both expressions. I told Donna before, is I don't use lower and higher vibration because I have judgments around that. And to stay out of judgments in reading, I just call them expanded or denser, because it removes any kind of judgment that higher is better or lower is worse. I mean, we don't judge lower notes and higher notes, but it's kind of built in, especially in the English language, as, you know, oh, that's a lower vibrational being. It's a denser vibration. You know, who am I to say it's lower? That might be the work of the person this year, this lifetime. You know, they signed up for it. So, you know, it's very interesting when you do charts, and you'll, like North nodes, there are some amazing people who had a North Node in Cancer, and so did Hitler. So how that expressed itself is very different from some of the other of how that shows up in people's charts.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, the other thing to know about this map is then as the stars in the sky are moving into these different placements, that lights up different parts of your chart. We're a circuit, and how the circuit is put together is exactly what the chart shows you. It's the, what's that called? Schematic of you. It's your schema. It's the circuit schematic. And so when certain planets are aligned with yours, that part of your circuit gets lit up. That's why some people react more to a certain kind of moon or a certain kind of earth, like earthquakes or whatever, feel them more. That's why some people are more able to understand the Schumann resonance versus solar flares. Some people feel those more.
Right.
So it has a lot to do with your schematic blueprint or your really what your chart will tell you. So that's what I read, is the story. And often I'll have spirits will come through and say, okay, now go read this and tell them why you read this. I'm like, and I'll even say it out loud, like, oh, that's why they took me here, because this goes back to something else that I was just reading. And so it's been an amazing journey to realize how much comes through in the channeling, because people will say, do you remember saying this? And I'm like, no.
Right.
No,
So
that's why we record it. So
when you're looking at somebody's astrology charts and you're sharing with them their story of how the placement of all of this works and things that they can expect or anticipate in life to how they would respond or react, do you find that there's like common themes within astrology, or is there each their own?
there are common themes because there are energies, archetypes associated, like let's say Jupiter. Jupiter is the archetype of expansion, change, higher learning. That is an archetype. So depending where that Jupiter placement is, what is the same is it's going to be some kind of learning, some kind of expansion. But how that shows up in each individual play may get expressed completely differently. So that's part of what I read. But there are definitely themes. It's very interesting reading charts now of women my age, because of course we have a lot of planets that are the same, and how that plays out has a lot to do with what moon they were born under versus, because then that becomes a piece of that, like being born under, I think you and I are born under the same. Ours is like been a building of life until we're a little bit older. We needed all of those experiences versus another person who could have the same placement but have a different expansion. That story will be similar to somebody who might have, but it's not the same because it has to do with all of the players. I mean, I think I read 15 signs or more I could read in a chart. So it really is the combination of it. But there definitely are markers for things like, I've been here a few lives before. I came, I talk about the bus stop conversation, and sometimes I'll say, oh, you decided you weren't doing that in this life again. There's places where I can see people are not as likely to take fabrications from people they do not like to be lied to. There's a kind of a footprint of that in a chart, or there's I accept no less than full truth from people, or there's people you can see that they're able to manipulate because they have the skill. Doesn't mean they're using it, but they have that ability. And often they'll say, when I was younger, I did a lot of that, but I came to understand that wasn't a good characteristic. So it kind of depends on the age too.
Wow. So one of the things I'm always curious about, because I've had my astrology chart read several different times, but what was different when you read it, not only was there the story that it was wrapped around, but it gave me a deeper understanding through that story, and then forward looking over the next year of certain energies or things that might be playing out in my life at certain times with over the next several months, which nobody has ever done that before. And what I found was that it took out that angst energy, because I could feel the energy coming. I know it's coming. It's there. It's happening. But then it never felt like it materialized. But when you shared with me some of those different aspects of it, it really took that angst energy out, going, oh, it's going to happen here, not there, because of the timing. I understand why, and I can accept it. And now I just see it unfolding. So do you find other people that have gone through a reading with you have some sort of healing or activation around the information they learned?
I thank you for telling me that, because I've had several people recently. So for me, one of the words I put out this year is confirmation. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Please, I have guidance as a word in confirmation. Thank you for that, because yes. Recently I had a guest on Intuition of the Soul, which I'm going to be asking Donna to come on to also. And she said, do you remember doing my reading? Well, I remember doing a reading. Do you remember when you told me blah, 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 blah? And that's exactly what happened. But me knowing exactly what you said, I was aware of it. So when it started to come up, I was like, oh, this is one of those things I can heal. I have this other tool to go with it. And so, yes, I am beginning to hear that. So thank you, because it's a little bit of a mystery, and knowing some of the things you can depend on, just what's coming, what kinds of tools you can depend on, and how you approach things kind of gives you that freedom to let it unwind versus I might have tried to micromanage it before. But my friend Teresa told me exactly the same thing recently. So yes, I can say definitely within 2 weeks now I've gotten this, and there have been other people, and some of the people have gone on to take the course because they wanted to be able to read the current energies and what could that mean in their chart. And I think that that's very valuable too, if you're very drawn to it. Learn to find out, what does this mean? As you know, I go on every day to tell you what's happening in the stars, just in general, for so
and
people
I know,
can do it.
for me personally, as a speaker and traveling around, I just came back from Mexico. I wasn't anticipating speaking. They asked me to speak. I did. My whole presentation style, everything was completely different, but that there was a calmness and there was a peace about it, and not the anxious anticipation of, oh no, if I don't do this, this won't happen. Because I know in the back of my mind, I already know a timeline. And in that timeline, these are when it lines up and it happens. So I'm just free to be me. It was like complete permission. And then what came back was more than I anticipated, people wanting to do different things with me to engage in services. So I found that really interesting, because that other energy just wasn't there in the piece of knowing what was in the astrology chart.
Yeah, I agree with you, because there are days, and this is just for me, where I'll be going, well, that would be that Uranus thing of mine that is happening right now. And I can just shift to look at it. It doesn't change what you're talking about. It doesn't change what I'm doing, but it gives me a different place for my heart I approach it from. Mm-hmm. It's really what it is, because I know it's another way to know thyself very deeply. And for me, falling in love with myself has been a lifelong journey. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to be the best person I could be, but I haven't always known how to do it without conflict versus nurture. And so it's a different way to nurture that.
All right. So we're here talking with Kitty on the Healing Heart podcast, all about astrology. We're going to take that quick sponsor break. And when we come back, I have a couple other questions that I know other people have asked of me, and I don't know the answers to in astrology. So we're just going to ask the expert here. So hold on, we will be right back. Get what you always wanted. Abundant life is possible. Transform your lifestyle in just weeks with the most innovative system developed for heart-centered business professionals who seek change today. you are one step away from creating infinite prosperity, happiness, and love. Grab your bonus link now that's in the show notes. All right, welcome back here to the Healing Heart podcast. And our guest today is Kitty. She is an amazing astrologer, and I have learned so much from her in just having my own personal astrology reading. Now, one of the questions that somebody asked me, I've had this come up twice, and they said, what happens? Because you have to have, the birth location, the birth date, and the time of where you were born to actually do an astrology chart. And I've had several people ask me, what if I don't know my birth time? It's not on my birth certificate, and there's nobody around that I can ask that could even have an inkling of remembering. What do you do in that case?
Well, it depends too a little bit on the state. Often, excuse me, you can go to the state level to get the state record, and it will often be there. That's not always 100% true.
Right.
Like I was able to find my mother's birth time. That's the state of Michigan. And those are the official records. So there are a couple ways you can still proceed. And part of that becomes that trust. If I don't know my time and I'm really drawn to this, then I'm going to trust that intuition that says there's something in there for me. What changes when you don't know your time is the placement in houses, not necessarily the sign, but maybe the actual house it's in for quite a few of the planets. Some of the planets, not so much. And it starts with your ascendant, because your ascendant is how you step into the world. So there's a couple ways I've done this with people personally, is I've done work with a pendulum. I've also had them, because what's interesting about knowing your rising sign is that's how other people see you. So I've done work with people, giving them a general description of, after talking to them, of different ways people might see you. And then I ask them to pick 5 friends and narrow it down to 3. You'd be surprised how often there might be one liar, but there's usually only 4 numbers that come back, giving those descriptions, letters. And then I talk to them about what so because it's how you step into the world, it's how other people see you. So that's why you ask others. And then the next part of the conversation is, how do people react to you? And that's only your perception of it. And so we kind of go over that. I also use the pendulum, and we can usually narrow it down to what the rising sign would be. Now, that won't give me the time, but it will give me a much more accurate picture of what houses and things stuff was placed in. There could be some that could be a couple off, just because they might have been at the end. But overall, people have been very happy with it. That takes longer. It takes a while to do. You've got to it's in several steps. And I usually have started with the pendulum, and I would say more than 90% of the time, it's been the same thing the pendulum told me to begin with, at least in the narrowing down. So that's one way you can do it if you can't actually get the actual physical. And if you can find out even a window of time, like I was born in the afternoon, we can even make it go faster or narrow it down by the date. Yeah,
I find that fascinating, because I do have a couple of people that I know, and even going through the state, the time is not on the certificate when you get the certified copy. So I find that interesting, but it's good to know that there's still a possibility, and to be able to have a reading so you can get the information and knowledge that you seek.
There's a faith in that.
There is.
Yeah, very much.
All right. The other question that came up from someone who's a little bit more skeptical said, what happens? Let's assume for a minute you're in a big, large city, 2 people born at the exact same time, on the exact same day, in the exact same location. Are they going to be like identical in their readings, or is it going to be a little different?
It's probably going to feel a little different. The energies are going to be similar. in my readings, I can only obviously speak about mine, because first of all, Spirit's going to take me to talk to them about something, or going to emphasize something that might not have been emphasized in the other person's chart, or something that happened in their decision of what family they joined has more to play in how this is playing out. So often Spirit is talking to me, so they'll say something, and I'll say, so in your childhood, blah, 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 and this is related to it. So it will not be the same reading. It will have some of the same information, but it changes depending how they walked through that particular, because they attracted different parts of their circuit to light up. Just like, even when you replace your phone and you get a new phone, never quite works exactly the same, even though it's the same model, even though it's got the same schema. It's how it fires. It's like anything.
All right. I love that, because every person is a different energy vibration, really, in the end. And it seems like you pick up on that and it gets expressed out, even though all of the measuring points are identical.
Right. And one of the things in like the course I teach is, traditionally there's kind of two thoughts in astrology. One is very kind of locked and loaded. This means this means this. And then the other is much more intuitive, empowering. This is what it could mean. Now you have the choice. That is one you have this in your conversation. I say that to people. You put it in here. Now, how you use it is completely up to you, but this is the energy around this. And so it's not very prescriptive. So yes, they will have similarities. I can give you an example of that. My twin nieces, they're not exactly the same time, but they're 3 or 4 minutes. So some of their points might be a couple off, but how it plays out in each of their charts when I was reading it was very different, because it can form a different relationship with something else on the other higher aspect piece, especially because there are a couple minutes there. So
cool. Really, really cool there. What I want to know, when you obviously read charts for individuals, do you ever look at and read charts for couples, 2 charts, to see how they interact together?
Yes, I do. I've done interesting combinations. I did a woman's who had a near-death experience. I did her original birth chart, and when she came back, that was interesting to see what had changed. And it was very, very interesting for her to hear it. This is what it used to be like. This is kind of how it's going now. I'm starting to kind of specialize with mothers and children, so that moms can learn ways to also understand how their child and their interaction is. So what I usually do is read the mothers, and then it's like a 2 reading, and then we do what's called a synastry chart. I've done couples before to see, especially like where their north nodes, where are their soul goals, both taking them. There are different things you read when you do comparison charts. They're called synastry. There's relationship charts. There's all kinds of astrology. But I like the comparison charts. The most interesting one I ever did, though, for me, was that death and near death, because it was amazingly listening to when we did it. She kept saying, this makes so much more sense as to what it felt like afterwards. So
yeah. Really, really cool. It gives me lots of ideas, because yes, I want more charts done for me. So how do people, I feel like I can talk with you for hours. I know I have here in the past as well, but how can people get in touch with you to learn more?
So my website's in the process of being created. So what they can do is reach out to Kitty Foss on Facebook and send me a message. Also, you can find me on Intuition of the Soul. As a matter of fact, if you join Intuition of the Soul, you have a discount for readings, and that's on Facebook. And between those two, you can always come to find me. I have a course I teach called Optimize that I'm going to be starting because of my wonderful host here. I'm going to be starting a kids course, and as well as another adult course. So best way probably is on Messenger or at intuitionofthesoul11@gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. We will make sure we get all of that included in the show notes for everybody. So all you have to do is just click and get in touch with Kitty. I recommend that you do. She's truly amazing, and I have learned so much just by
thank you.
sharing with all of that. Any last words that you have?
Just about this year for everybody. Just know this is a tremendous year of clarity and change, and especially at this moment we're speaking in time. This is late April. Compassion through the month of May is going to be amazingly important, but compassion the rest of this year, understanding that this is new for all of us and stepping into our divineness is very important. So
I love it. I love it, because compassion is the doorway to part of opening that heart space and reconnecting you back to that spirit energy that we all have. So, all right, everybody, reach out to Kitty. And for all of you that have been listening, just remember to always go and create that beautiful day.